What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and welcome back to the Rumor Roundup. And I have my cup of coffee with me, thank God, because I'm recording this pretty early and I don't know what I'd do without it. And as we get into our first segment today, a whole host of names have been announced for Phase 5 in the MCU, and rumors abound as to who these guys are playing. So, as far as we're aware, this list is John Boyega, Henry Cavill, Jodie Comer, Daisy Edgar Jones, John Krasinski, Giancarlo Esposito, and Denzel Washington. Now, you guys can probably imagine everybody's kind of foaming at the mouth when it comes to Giancarlo Esposito, John Krasinski, and Denzel Washington. Now, when it comes to Giancarlo Esposito and Denzel Washington, really even John Boyega, we can throw his name in there as well. The rumor going on here is that Giancarlo Esposito is going to be playing Charles Xavier, and people have been reacting to this with mixed reactions. Some love it, some hate it. What's really got me excited here, as much as I love Giancarlo Esposito, I'll watch anything he's in. What's really got me excited here is Denzel Washington and John Boyega, because what it could do is it could basically give us like Adam Brashear, the Blue Marvel. And that's what I've been advocating for a long time. Now, fans out there have been screaming that Denzel Washington could play Adam Brashear and it would be believable, and it would. The biggest downside that I have with Denzel Washington playing Adam Brashear is that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is moving in the direction of hiring younger actors to play characters for longer. Somebody who can play this character for upwards of like 17 years, maybe even 20 if they can kind of keep them along and keep their character that popular. So as much as I love the idea of Denzel Washington playing Adam Brashear, I would much rather it be John Boyega, that he can play the character for longer, and assuming he doesn't have any other contractual agreements, there wouldn't really be anything else getting in the way of his ability to play that character for the long term. But regardless, as far as the John Krasinski Reed Richards rumor goes, this seems to fly in the face with our next piece of news here, which is that apparently Penn Badgley is being cast as Reed Richards in the MCU. Now, this is not absolutely confirmed. We don't know definitively if this is the case. Penn Badgley, I'm not overly against. He's been in a whole bunch of movies that I've never seen, which include like John Tucker Must Die. Having said that, I still advocate John Krasinski plays Reed Richards. I think that needs to happen. I think John Krasinski as Reed, the way he played the character in Doctor Strange 2 was everything I thought it would be, and he would be a phenomenal Reed Richards in the MCU. He exudes that kind of authority. He's also a little cocky and arrogant. He has everything that you need for a person to believably play Reed Richards. Penn Badgley, I'm not 100% sure, but I could see him as maybe being Doctor Doom if they wanted to, or some other role, possibly the Human Torch. But honestly, I want Krasinski back as Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four, and I will never want anybody but him. I will go see other people but him, but at the end of the day, I will only want him to play Reed Richards in the MCU. But moving on to our next bit of news here, apparently Yelena Belova is going to be the leader of the Thunderbolts, which is an interesting change of pace. In the comics, it was Baron Zemo. Undoubtedly, this is going to draw out people who are like, blarg, women in positions of authority, blarg, you know, whatever. I don't really care. I think Yelena is probably the best person to lead the Thunderbolts. She's got the capabilities, she's got the fighting prowess, and plus, they're trying to build her up to being the next Black Widow, to basically replace Natasha Romanoff. I don't know how big of a deal this is. Apparently, US Agent and Baron Zemo will be on the team. I guess they'll just kind of be members of the team. At the end of the day, it will still be cool, right? Basically a team of villains who are brought together. Now, I don't know how far-reaching that's going to be. I don't know exactly what their plot point's going to be, but there have been some cool Thunderbolts rosters. That's one of the things to know, is that Thunderbolts has kind of been billed by Marvel as like the throwaway team, but on the comics, you've had like Red Hulk, Elektra, which probably none of you guys care about. Deadpool was on that team, and in fact, I want to say that Deadpool, Elektra, and Red Hulk were all on the team at the same time together at one point in time. It's still a cool thing, right? I'm still looking to the Thunderbolts project. So on to our next bit of news here. DC Fandom has been canceled, and before all you guys start freaking out over the fact that Discovery just canceled another thing at DC Comics, this is actually being done because the COVID restrictions are over, and so what DC wants to do is focus more on in-person events, which makes sense because DC Fandom was designed to be more of a digital event. I mean, this is not the biggest piece of news ever, but I do believe this is one of those instances when something does need to be said for all the people who were just like, yep, this is Discovery canceling and DC's just, you know, totally jumping the shark and this is the end of all things, right? The end is nigh for DC Comics. That's not really what this is. This is actually them just kind of shifting over to more in-person events as opposed to doing digital fandom events like they've been doing. But before we jump into the really big pieces of news, let's switch over to gaming here for a second. Right? Let's talk about some gaming related content as we always do here on the Rumor Roundup. And the first real piece of news here is that Big Chungus might be coming to multiverses. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who Big Chungus is, Big Chungus has a fan base. People love Big Chungus. It's Fat Bugs Bunny, and he's supposedly going to be coming to multiverses, which for those of you guys who don't know who that is, it's Warner Brothers' own fighting game, which crosses over basically all the properties they own. So basically their version of Super Smash Bros. But it's going to be really, really cool. And honestly, I think seeing a Fat Bugs Bunny out there would be pretty entertaining. And honestly, this is just one of those instances where fans organizing things in such a way can lead to the creation of something awesome. For example, for those of you guys who don't know, the Multiverses game by Warner Brothers was inspired by Ultra Instinct Shaggy. Literally, there was a Scooby-Doo scene where Shaggy got into like a bar fight and somebody put Ultra Instinct music to it from Dragon Ball. And that basically led to a slew of just memes and even its own subculture. Quite literally, Ultra Instinct Shaggy has his own subculture, right? And in fact, like Shaggy's kind of referred to as like Shaggy Power. It's its own thing, right? It's really, really cool if you ever get a chance. But like literally the whole Ultra Instinct Shaggy thing is at least partially what led to the creation of multiverses. So grassroots movements by fans, they do have an impact on the greater industry. And it is really cool to see it unfold, especially here with seeing Big Chungus in multiverses. Now, our next big one is of course another instance of Ubisoft screwing up. So for those of you guys who don't know, when it comes to game makers, they usually screw stuff up. And in this instance, Ubisoft, who basically came out and said they were decommissioning older titles. Now, not in the sense that they're getting rid of them, but in the sense that they were removing multiplayer from those titles. Assassin's Creed, Far Cry 3, things like that. And while games like Far Cry 3 are old games, even though the single player is still one of the greatest single player games ever made for a Far Cry game, the point being, actually I'd say it's the best for a Far Cry game. The point being here that there's still an online dedicated fan base for those individual games. And when people saw that Ubisoft was coming out and saying like, we're just totally decommissioning and shutting down all that online stuff, the bigger concern that people had beyond any multiplayer capability was they would lose access to their DLC. Now, of course, Ubisoft came back and said, no, that's not going to be the case, because Ubisoft and EA, they're the companies where they would just decommission all that online stuff. They would take away everybody's DLC and then they would make you pay for it again. And so ultimately it was, again, one of these kind of grassroots things from fans where there was just so much outcry that Ubisoft backpedaled and said, no, we're going to hold off for right now. We're not going to get rid of the online stuff. They're going to do it in October as opposed to doing it in September. So they pushed it back by about a month, and they're also going to let people keep their DLC. So for the time being, people will get a chance to enjoy the online capabilities of those Ubisoft games, but they are going to go away, unfortunately. So, I guess I'll have to find something else to play. So as we segue into our last bit of news here on the Rumor Roundup, we're going to wrap up our gaming segment here by focusing on Spider-Man, which is coincidentally going to be the last topic that we talk about for the Rumor Roundup. But when it comes to the Spider-Man game, which is now on PC, as to be expected, modders are modding the hell out of this game. And you can play as all kinds of different characters. One, the graphics mods look phenomenal. They look insane, and they're only going to get better. You can play as Saul Goodman, which is cool, right? That's really exciting. You can play as Sora from Kingdom Hearts. And if you're particularly morbid, you can play as Uncle Ben's gravestone. Which I have not done. I probably will, to be honest. And I feel like some of you guys are just going to rush to the game to download the Uncle Ben Gravestone mod, and you're going to play as Uncle Ben's gravestone, which is kind of hilarious watching Uncle Ben's gravestone just beat the hell out of people. But nonetheless, right, the modding community is in full swing on the Spider-Man game, and I'm excited to see everything they come up with. But segueing into our final bit of news, right, our final news tidbit here on the Rumor Roundup, this goes into the rumors that people are claiming are confirmed, but we don't really know that anything is confirmed, that Tobey Maguire is returning as Spider-Man for Avengers Kang Dynasty. Now, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense that Tobey Maguire would come back. Kang Dynasty is obviously going to be a multiversal story, that if they want to build up the presence of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland's continuing role as Spider-Man in the MCU, or at least as part of the greater multiverse, the better way to do that is to have individual moments where like Andrew Garfield appears in a film, or Tobey Maguire appears in a film, or Tom Holland shows up in a film, because what it does is it allows those characters to appear and to gain exposure and to even thrive in the eyes of the audience without having to be a side-along to like some other version of Spider-Man. Because at the end of the day, there are just Tom Holland fans who don't really care about Tobey Maguire because they see Tobey as being before their time. There are other people who are fans, and when I say fans, I mean like 5 or 6 people who are fans of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And then of course there are people who are fans of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Spider-Man. Actually, to be serious and to be honest with you guys, Andrew Garfield has a much larger following than he did before. But I think this is a smart move. Now, again, I don't know if this is definitively true. And the real big role you'd have to ask here is, what role is Tobey Maguire going to be playing here? Well, I think in the end, it comes down to what Tom Holland's going to be doing. Because the bigger gist here is that with the Kang Dynasty film being a multiversal story that will likely start in Quantumania, it'll build in Loki Season 2, and then wrap up in the Avengers Kang Dynasty storyline, that I think that this is going to be one of those instances where we're going to see a multiversal Avengers team. If anything, and I've been saying this before, and in fact, we'll link a video to it, and if I didn't make the video on it, I need to, that basically the Avengers are going to feel like the Exiles. Right? For those of you guys who don't know, the Exiles are literally a multiversal team composed of people in Marvel Comics, each of whom just comes from a different universe. It's a patchwork team of multiversal superheroes, and having that in the Kang Dynasty film, I think is going to be the case. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a way for Marvel Studios to give us characters that we've always wanted to see team up for a singular film in some capacity. So you get Tobey Maguire's, you get like his version of Spider-Man on the team. So the team has Spider-Man. You get maybe Peggy Carter who comes back. Same thing with Iron Man. This could be our opportunity to get Tom Cruise's superior Iron Man. Just one of those things where it feels like a patchwork team, because it is, right? Like a hodgepodge team. I don't know if that's exactly what's going to happen, but I think grabbing people from across the multiverse to team up and defeat Kang the Conqueror is a genius idea. I think it's the smartest thing to do, especially if that team is assembled by Loki. I think that would be a genius maneuver. And in fact, I'm going to make a video theorizing that this week. But having said that, guys, we're going to bring this episode of the Rumor Roundup to an end. Thank you all for watching. Make sure that you guys check out our videos if you want to see more theories and breakdowns and all that kind of good stuff. And I will catch you all later. Peace.